So we've got the new M2 iPad Air 6, and sure, it's a nice upgrade, but what if I told you there's another iPad that'll get you 90% of the same features, and most people would even think it's an iPad Air, but for half the cost? As far as the price goes, the new iPad Air 6 starts at $599, and the new standard lower price of the iPad 10 is $329. One big advantage for the iPad Air is it starts with double the storage at 128 versus 64. 256 gigabytes is the max for the iPad 10 versus 1 terabyte for the iPad Air. You also get 4 color options for both, a little more vibrant on the iPad 10 versus a more subtle or lighter colors on the iPad Air. I feel like you've got pretty good options for both. As far as the display goes, you've got the exact same size 10.86 inch LED backlit IPS display on both iPads. They just happen to round up on the iPad 10 to 10.9, and they round up to 11 on the iPad Air, even though they're the same size. Both are 500 nits brightness with 2360 by 1640 resolution at the same 264 pixels per inch. One difference for the Air is it's fully laminated where the iPad 10 is not, but does it really matter for most people? Probably not. Both are also 60 Hz refresh rate. You also have an anti-reflective coating on the Air, which you can just barely notice the difference when you put these next to each other. And yes, the Air is a tad thinner. It's 6.1 millimeters versus 7 for the iPad 10, and it weighs 462 grams versus 481 for the iPad 10. As far as battery life goes, they're almost identical, lasting 5.5 hours in my typical battery drain test at 100% screen brightness, so you can't really go wrong with either one as far as battery life goes. You should have plenty to last a couple days with mixed usage, obviously even more if you turn the screen brightness down. As far as the software goes, both iPads are on iPadOS 17.5.1, so they're going to be almost identical, except you only get Stage Manager on iPad Air for some reason, which could come in handy for some people. Another thing I noticed is for some reason when I tap on the control center on the iPad 10 with the USB-C pencil, it doesn't pop up, but with the iPad Air, it does work. I would think that's software related, so I'm not sure why that's different. A lot of things are going to be very similar with the software. You can also send files through AirDrop if you have a Mac for both iPads, and they both have video out, so you can connect these to a projector or TV using an HDMI adapter. I feel like there's not a big enough difference for the iPad Air when it comes to software, but yes, it does have some extra features. They both have Touch ID right on the power button. They both work with the USB-C Apple Pencil. The iPad 10 works with the first gen Apple Pencil as well. But with the iPad Air, you now can use the new Pencil Pro, and it does have a couple extras. You can squeeze the pencil to bring up tools or double tap it and things like that. But you have a couple pencil options for both iPads, so I don't think it's a huge difference there. Now, as far as performance goes, the iPad 10 has the A14 Bionic chip. The iPad Air has the newer M2 processor. You also have 4 gigabytes of RAM in the iPad 10 versus 8 in the iPad Air. So the iPad Air is going to be quite a bit more powerful. It's got double the multi-core score and more than double the GPU score. So if you're doing anything more intense, like anything over 4K resolution for video editing, you might notice a difference between these two. But for almost everything else that normal people who aren't YouTubers or creatives, the iPad 10 has more than enough power. Both are good options for gaming as well. Again, the iPad 10 has plenty of power to handle pretty much any game. I mean, yes, the iPad Air is more powerful, but do you really need that extra power? It could just come down to personal preference. For me, I think the iPad 10 has plenty. Just keep in mind, the iPad 10 has better performance than most other tablets out there, especially at this price range. You'll notice when it comes to the speakers, it looks like there's 4 speakers, but if you listen closely, there's just 1 speaker on each side, and they're not the loudest out there, but they do have good sound quality. I wouldn't be surprised if they're using the same exact speakers on the inside of both, because it's really close between these two. Here's a quick sample just to give you an idea of what they sound like. As far as cameras go, you've got a 12 megapixel wide angle lens. You can also shoot up to 4K 60 frames per second for video on both iPads. On the front, you have a 12 megapixel ultra wide for both iPads. Here's a quick sample just to give you an idea of what to expect from each. So both are going to be good for Zoom meetings or other video conference calls. Overall though, there's so many similarities between these two. I would definitely recommend the iPad 10 to anyone who wants the new iPad Air, but you only want to spend about half the amount. But also keep in mind, there's one more option out there that's just a tad bit more, which is the iPad Air 5. And with that, you can use the 2nd gen Apple Pencil. It's got better performance than the iPad 10, and you get the extras like Stage Manager. So that's definitely something to consider as well. So if you've made it this far into the video, you may want to say thanks by subscribing, and don't forget to give a thumbs up if this video was helpful. This is Brian from Fishbee Productions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.